Isaac 98.1 FM. Inspirational, spirit-led, anointed, appointed, and Christ-centered.
Hello, I'm Stephen Cummings. Join us every Wednesday for the Citizens Community Forum. Where are we now? Your assessment.
We are in a very dark place. As Savidia Naipaul wrote in a title of his book, we are in an area of darkness.
The structure of the economy between 2009 and 2019, Stephen, landed this economy in the 25 worst performing economies in the world. Stephen, my honest answer is, except for the poorest and most vulnerable, we have to cut. It's not as if we have a choice.
And that's why I'm saying, Stephen, we really need some clear guidance and direction in terms of what's the long-term plan. We know we're in a dark place, but we need you to be able to show us the light and show us, well, okay, we're heading in that direction. We don't want to end up like the Israelites wandering for 40 years in the desert and making no progress whatsoever.
And we are streaming live on YouTube, FBN TV, Facebook, and Isaac 98.1 FM. Every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m. Good evening, I'm Stephen Cummings, and welcome again to the Citizens Community Forum. And just a slight shift in our program for today, this evening. The content is slightly different, albeit you may say that it's all in the same vein in terms of our public discussion and the engagement of our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. But as per usual, our objective is always to have an engaging, interactive, and civil discourse, and in so doing, help develop a culture of peace and understanding through constructive dialogue and, yes, citizens' participation. Our guests are persons who express views and opinions and perspectives of their own, and sometimes may not necessarily be that of the FBN network, the Citizens Community Forum, or that of the host. Now, our topics are wide-ranging. Discussions at times may be emotionally charged, but surely we can always find common ground and learn from each other, irrespective of differing views. Now, October 4th, 2021 is Budget Day in Trinidad and Tobago, and already we're hearing from many citizens from various sectors of the economy what they would like to see come October 4th. And there is no doubt that the Finance Minister, Con Embert, will be tasked with what can be probably described as one of the most difficult of national budgets when one considers the ravages of the global pandemic and the health crisis that have literally forced countries to go into economic reset. At this time, inside the Citizens Community Forum, our topic this evening, expectations and recommendations for Budget 2021-2022, a citizen's perspective. And to discuss the issue, joining me via Zoom is Dr. Fuad Khan, a former Member of Parliament, and we do also expect Ms. Lara Quinchel-Thomas, Chairman, Regency Recruitment and Resources Limited, also expert in human resource management, and we hope that Ms. Quinchel-Thomas will be able to connect with us. She's not on the platform at the moment, but we do hope that she's able to connect with us before the program is through this evening. But let me welcome to the Citizens Community Forum for yet another time Dr. Fuad Khan. Dr. Khan, welcome to the Citizens Community Forum.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you for inviting me. And a pleasant good afternoon to the listeners of your program.
Yes, Dr. Khan, thank you so much again. I know that we had a discussion on the last occasion, and I felt the need for us to connect again, albeit on a slightly different topic. As we're talking, Budget 2021, 2022. Dr. Khan, I want to, have you start out the discussion. It's a question I would normally ask, any of our guests. What are you expecting from this budget? I did, in my opening, mention that it is going to be one of the most difficult of national budgets. And you being a former, MP, member of Parliament, and who also continue to be involved in initiatives of national development nature, what are you looking for generally as we start off the discussion, come October 4th?
Well, Stephen, I have sat through about 25 budgets in my time as a member of Parliament, and every time the budget is read, be it our party in office or otherwise, the budget has a lot of flair and it's a lot of expectations and a lot of what we can do. However, the next year rolls over and the new budget starts off, and majority of the previous year's budget has not been accomplished. And you've got another budget with part of the last year's budget and it forward what you hope to do. And I've always held the view that budgets, like expenditures, should be changed and made into let's say a 3-yearly budget or 4-yearly budget, or some expectations with small areas that are projected each year of the recurrent expenditure. And the plan and the goal would have to be for a 5-year to 6-year period, even as much as a 10-year period.
Yes.
Because you start things and what I found, the budget is read around September, October, end of September, early October. This time it's October. And by December, nothing much has happened. And by January, you may get legislation for certain things that were addressed in the budget. And by March, some of it might occur. And then you have June, you're scrambling to put things in for the budget that's coming up in October. And that is a cycle that occurs throughout the system indefinitely. So that is what I have seen occurring with budgets, and it happens all over. And if one decides the goal setting arrangement, and I know it will be different, but the legislative agenda dictates that we do this every year.
Yes.
And the legislation dictates that the budget is read every year. And the budget and that's how the legislation is enacted. But I wonder if when it was enacted, if people really gave thought to the process of public procurement and public action, that doesn't really augur well for this. And you will find another budget being read, and last year's budget, a majority of last year's budget will not have occurred because they will say COVID and pandemic. And next year it will occur. So the discussion we're having today would be exactly what we would have in a year time or year before.
All right. So you're saying, Dr. Khan, you don't expect any drastic change in terms of the content and by extension even implementation of some of those things that we normally would have been detailed in a budget.
Exactly. I would not expect much, and the capital expenditure I don't think will occur to any great extent, and the forward projections may not have anything major in it, except the recurrent expenditure, and that one might be less of what was a given last year because we are in a tight spot economically. The regulations and the reaction to the COVID has brought out as the start of a recession. So this will be a budget in a recessionary time brought about by the regulations for COVID.
Okay.
And that is what's going to happen in this budget.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Dr. Khan. Now, with the uncertainties in oil and gas, in the oil and gas markets, to generate the kind of revenue needed for economic stability and growth in our GDP, I want to ask you again, where do you believe, emphasis should be placed for the future of Trinidad and Tobago? Now, I continue to hear local economists speaking of the continuous decline in oil and gas production digitalization and the importance of the non-oil, non-energy sector. And before you answer that question, Dr. Ken, I want to, there was an interview which was done, a program which was done with economist Dr. Roger Hussein earlier on, and he referenced, this very same important area of our oil and gas sector. Where are we going? What we should be doing? And I just wanted to get us to have a listen to what he would have said, so that we can get probably some additional perspectives going forward, and then I will have you respond. So let's listen to economist Dr. Roger Hussein.
The next question is, got a comment about the private sector growth. I showed a graph with private sector employment and public sector employment and showed that output per worker in the private sector was significantly, I think was as much as twice as high as in the government sector. And I used non-energy private sector. And so to avoid the bowel cost disease, or what we call asymptotic stagnancy, it makes no sense for the state to continue to absorb all the workers in the format shown in the graph if it is their output per worker is significantly lower than in the private sector. So I would have a closer look at that if I were a policymaker and try to adjust it.
All right. Now, he mentioned there about, the importance of the non-oil, non-energy sector. And I think that when we talk about a budget, certainly, Dr. Khan, especially for this 2021-2022 budget, emphasis has to be placed on the private sector development, and, that whole adage of moving away from oil and gas in terms of, generating employment. And again, I go back to that which can impact on our GDP.
Well, Stephen, if you think about it, oil and gas has been declining for a long time. In fact, it is declining so much that the government had to dip into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund for expenditure. Mr. Roger Hussein, who just spoke, showed that the output of the private sector non-energy area is 2 times that of the public sector public sector output. Now, we do have a large public sector, but are they producing value for money? This is something that has to be addressed. And it's basically, at the end of the day, the government will eventually have to bite the bullet to reform the public sector based on the performance. Now, I would have liked to have seen there is a new world outside, which is called the digital world. In the digital world, you make multi-millionaires of small people, depending on how they develop their profiles on the World Wide Web. Instagram, Facebook, Instagram, yes. Amazon, everybody. If you look at the history of Amazon and you look at the history of Uber and those things, they all have a platform of internet. Now, we are spending a lot of time on oil and gas. Yes, we have a comparative advantage because we have oil and gas, but the world prices have dropped, and also Guyana is now rising with oil, yes. And people are moving across there. So the government has to find a way to make money, to get revenue, not just by taxing people to get whatever little they have, because the people of the day will have to make money to be taxed.
Yes.
So you have to make sure that how can we harness the digital world? Now, my thing is health, as you are quite right to say. There are consultations that can occur on the digital world and digital platforms.
Yes.
And that, I think, is the way we have to go to spread out to the whole world itself, rather than locking ourselves into oil and gas and whatever CARICOM manufacturer was ready to manufacture CARICOM.
Right. Well, it's important, again, Dr. Khan, as you mentioned that, the importance of digitization now. But before we develop that point on digitization further, I want also for us to get a listen to another economist who I know that you're very much familiar with, is Kevin Ramnarine, and he also had some perspective on where we are as a country in terms of our oil and gas revenue, which we all know is going to be featured very much in this upcoming budget.
I start off with natural gas production, just to give some context on where we are with that. In 2010, Trinidad and Tobago's natural gas production was its highest ever, 4.3 billion cubic feet of gas per day. By the time 2015 came around, it had fallen to 3.8 billion cubic feet of gas per day. And it is now around 2.7 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day. So we've had a constant decline in gas production over the last 11 years. There was some brief respite provided by Juniper and Angelin around 2018 and 2019, but the decline has now been very sharp in the last 2 years in particular. So the story with regard to natural gas for the last 11 years has been generally downward. See, the same thing applies to oil production. We are currently averaging around 58,000 barrels of oil per day, and in 2015 that was 78,000 barrels of oil per day.
Again, economist Kevin Ramnarine. So from 2010, Dr. Khan, we've been seeing a decline based on the projections and the observations of Kevin Ramnarine. And my question is, where are we going to generate that additional, bit of revenue to finance this budget, which some people are saying, probably should or will be, one of the more difficult budgets, as I said, and probably, if we look back more recent times, I think our highest was, in terms of our budgetary allocation, was somewhere around $60 billion. Apart from just taxation, and we're going to talk about, I would want you to touch a bit on the property tax a little later on in the discussion. But apart from just, direct taxation, where else can you see us generating that kind of revenue to finance a budget in 2021, 2022, knowing that we are in a squeeze, as it were, an economic squeeze, as it were?
The thing about it, Stephen, is oil and gas are the mainstay of production, as well as manufactured goods to carry from. That is of export goods, exported goods. We have a high level of import. Now, you can make revenue by spending less.
Mm-hmm.
If you spend less, your revenue, what you are generating, will increase because your expenditure will decrease.
But Dr. Khan, it means that if you're spending less, you have to cut somewhere.
Of course, no. What I'm saying, there are a lot of things that are on the imported list, which we consider to be foodstuff, like things that we could grow in Trinidad, agriculture, things that we can make in Trinidad and grow in Trinidad. I would suggest that the government put things in place to stimulate that part of the economy. So we will spend less on consumer items coming in. So if you spend less on imported consumer items that you can manufacture in Trinidad, basically you're decreasing your cost of sales. But your revenue, even if it stays the same, will have an apparent increase. So at the end of the day, you could spend on other things. But there is lip service being paid to agriculture and manufacture. So at the end of the day, we have to be more stringent in looking at our agricultural assessment, as well as subsidies, etc., that is given out. What is the performance benchmarking? What is the value for money? I am giving you a free run, right? I'm giving you tax write-offs and everything else for you. What is your export capabilities? Are we properly exporting it? Are we properly storing it? Do we have things in place to change gears, to change the system in place?
Yes. Okay, very important. And you're listening to and viewing the Citizens Community Forum. Our topic today, this evening, expectations and recommendations for Budget 2021-2022, a citizen's perspective. And I have with me Dr. Fuad Khan, former Member of Parliament, and of course of Trinidad and Tobago. And we were expecting Miss Lara Quinchell Thomas to join us, but I believe she may have some technical difficulties in connecting with us. In any event, we will seek to speak with her, if not during the program, certainly at a future time. Dr. Khan, now, looking back on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, we have been seeing where the budgetary allocations for health has, increased, I suppose some people may say marginally. Do you expect us to have maybe probably when you look at the different, allocations for housing, public utilities, are you expecting more to be spent in this budget when we look at, of course, our health crisis and what we've had how we've had to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, the budget allocation for health, that will be more or less for recurrent expenditure and minimal of capital expenditure. It's going to be along that level. Mm-hmm. However, there's a lot of off-budget expenditure, and that has been happening with COVID. A lot of the COVID expenditure is off-budget. Mm-hmm. It's not being legislated for, and it's not being budgeted for. Mm-hmm. So that is a sort of we are in a so-called pandemic, and as a result of being a so-called pandemic, you are using your emergency funds to satisfy the need. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, the government has to make a decision whether they want to continue locking down Trinidad and Tobago economically, locking it down to such an extent that they have to dip into their savings to support the industries that are not working. Mm-hmm. So, and I doubt that will come about in the budget for health. Mm-hmm. Health budget has a very high recurrent expenditure. Mm-hmm. You may need, and if you try to cut back any part of that, you are going to have gaps in the system. Okay. And how much of it will be going forward into the capital expenditure? Not much, except what is happening right now. There may be no new projects.
Mm-hmm. Right, because why I mentioned that, because I know that, come October 4th, a lot is going to be focused on our response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the health sector. And, as I said, it is also the expectation that we are going to have to become maybe a little more creative, Dr. Khan, in terms of, treating with not only health, but the overall, state of the economy. If you were, let's say, the finance minister, Dr. Khan, and in terms of all these, you spoke about these capital projects, is it that you're seeing that the time is probably right to maybe cut back on some of those large capital projects and probably use some of that revenue to support the health sector at this time?
Well, if I were the finance minister, I would look at the majority of places where a lot of, as I say, shrinkage is a nice word for wastage. Is occurring. You understand something?
Yes.
There is a lot of wasted money in the system, and that could be looked at if one decides to do the audits in the right place, not just audits that trap people and see how best they could carry them to court. Audit systems in these correct areas can be done, because I remember in C40, which is where the drugs are kept and housed, what happens throughout the year, there is a lot of emergency buying of items, and at a very high and exorbitant price. Another thing too, if you budget for certain trolleys and other things, if they take the lowest bidder, and within 2 months the trolleys are mashed up, and at the end of the day, you have to purchase more of the better trolleys, and this is emergency funding, and they are ECG and allocation. So there's a lot of things you could look at where a lot of wastage takes place in the health sector. But because of its called, you are given a lump sum arrangement to the regional health authorities and say that is what you have to spend for the year. And what they do, they spend it and then ask for more. But they don't really do assessments and performances of the procurement. Procurement is procurement, and they go ahead. The finance minister has to now put a system in place, and I've always, in fact, I mentioned it to my prime minister, was Mr. Prasad Visesha, to have a ministry dedicated to what they call the Ministry of Follow-up and Assessment.
Ministry of Follow-up and Assessment. Okay.
So the Ministry of Follow-up would go and check to see where wastage. Yes.
That's an interesting one, Dr. Khan, but I would allow you to develop that point. Go ahead, yes.
Yes, because in Dubai, when I was there, the king had a minister of follow-up and assessment. And that person would go around and check the other ministries to see if what they were saying was being done correctly and on time, check the performances and where they could be done better. In Trinidad and Tobago and different parts of the world, we have all ministries doing what they want. And at the end of the day, there's no, as they say, ministry of follow-up and assessment. There's nothing to follow up and assess. It goes over and over and over and over. So we need to change gears. And if I was the Minister of Finance, I would have pushed a lot into the digital world and also into the agricultural world. Because a country that could feed itself, right, will at least have, will not be expending as much as we do right now.
All right. Now, I know that there has been a lot of discussion around, issues of where we can better, dispense the resources. I mean, you have every year, you have an issue where you have to be able to have the right kinds of financial allocation, adjustments wherever that is necessary. But in terms of if we look at, for example, Dr. Khan, transfers and subsidies, it is also said that we are going to have to treat with this area as well, come October 4th. And we know when we talk about transfers and subsidies, I think one of the areas that the government has always kept close to its heart, and not only this current government, but previous administrations, is that of the social sector. And is it that you believe we, in terms of our whole structural adjustment, do you see us, cutting anywhere where the side of the social sector is concerned, or are you recommending that we should keep that intact, knowing our vulnerable populations in Trinidad and Tobago?
What I've learned about the social sector, the more something is given out, the bigger it grows. So at the end of the day, you could never satisfy the social sector. You will continue to be given to the social sector. It will continue to grow until it eats away the whole budget. That is what's going to happen to the social sector.
So that's a cancer that we have to, if I may put it, bluntly like that. It's a cancer that we have to avoid.
That is why the government does not want to go to the IMF, because the IMF will tell the government that they have to decrease the social the handouts in the social sector. What I have found in the social sector, there's a lot of people given a lot of money, right? But at the end of the day, they're not being stimulated to work. Because, what I had planned with Dr. Glenn Ramadasing, he was Minister of the People and I was the social sector. That yes, we will give people money as assistance, but we will find jobs for them or somebody in the household. So they will not be dependent on the state indefinitely. In Trinidad and Tobago, there is always another layer to get from the state, be it whatever it may be. Now, there's some harsh saying that, but there are a lot of people who need the social sector and who need things from the social sector. They have a hard time getting it. What I noticed, there are a lot of people who can work and fix them and work for their own money and purchase their own items. They get a lot of things from the social sector. Because they know how to run the system.
Right, and we've also, heard of allegations of corruption, double dipping, and persons who.
It's all that. It's all that. The people understand how to manage the system, and they get it. But those who need it sometimes do get it.
All right. Well, and you're listening to and viewing the Citizens Community Forum. Our topic this evening, expectations and recommendations for Budget 2021-2022, a citizen's perspective. And I have with me Dr. Fuad Khan, former member of Parliament of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Khan, what we'll do at the moment, we have to take a short break, and when we come back, we will continue the discussion. Hello, I'm Stephen Cummings. Join us every Wednesday for the Citizens Community Forum. Where are we now? Your assessment.
We're in a very dark place. As Mr. Vivian Paul wrote in a title of his book, we are in an area of darkness.
The structure of the economy between 2009 and 2019, Stephen, landed this economy in the 25 worst performing economies in the world. Even my honest answer is, except for the poorest and most vulnerable, we have to cut. It's not as if we have a choice.
And that's why I'm saying, Stephen, we really need some clear guidance and direction from the government in terms of what's the long-term plan. We know we're in a dark place, but we need you to be able to show us the light and show us, well, okay, we're headed in that direction. We don't want to end up like the Israelites wandering for 40 years in the desert and making no progress whatsoever.
And we are streaming live on YouTube, FBN TV, Facebook, and Isaac 98.1 FM every Wednesday, 8 to 9 p.m. And welcome back to the Citizens Community Forum. I'm Stephen Cummings, and this evening we are discussing, focusing on the budget. That's the 2021-2022 budget, which will be read and or presented on the 4th of October. And our topic this evening, expectations and recommendations for budget 2021-2022. A citizen's perspective. And I have with me Dr. Ford Khan, a former member of Parliament, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Khan, welcome back.
Thank you, Stephen.
Now, looking ahead, Dr. Khan, I think a lot of our citizens are expecting to have some sort of cushioning, as it were, coming out of a pandemic. We've had almost, 2 years of a lockdown situation, Dr. Khan. And I've been hearing the cries of the business sector, the SMEs, and especially, those, what we would describe as those vulnerable communities across Trinidad and Tobago, the small businesses, the people in the craft, sector. And the call has also been for some kind of stimulus package. I've also been hearing the opposition talking about the importance of boosting and assisting the SMEs. What are your recommendations for helping small and micro enterprise sectors and persons who operate in that sector to help I suppose ease out of this this pandemic and probably create a better platform for them? What are some of your recommendations in reference to what I suppose the finance minister may present on Monday, on October 4th? Sorry.
Stephen, I don't believe the finance minister will ever be able to give the small and medium enterprises any great assistance. What I think that has to be done is the fear mongering and what is happening as a result of the regulations from COVID. They have to open the economy and let the small and medium enterprises start working back to make their own money. Mm-hmm. This is what has to happen. Other than that, nothing else will work. You cannot continue to supply money indefinitely and hope that it will turn around on its own. It's not going to happen. The finance minister should indicate to the prime minister and the minister of health that enough is enough and we cannot continue along this vein, because COVID is not like Ebola. Ebola is something that has an 80 to 90% death rate. COVID has a 0.001% mortality rate of people who are already sick, comorbidities. So the economy has to be opened, and we have to get back to norm. When I say economic normalcy, right now, what is occurring is complete destruction and recession occurs.
Dr. Khan, we can't finish this discussion without focus on the property tax. And I did reference that very early when we started our discussion. How much, people are telling you, well, maybe it's not the right time to. Some people are saying maybe it's not the right time to have to go this way with the property tax. Other people are saying, well, when is the right time? Because when we talk about the property tax, we all know historically this has always been an issue when we go back to the days of the land and building taxes, and maybe people are saying, well, because of the current situation for which the economy is placed, we may it might be better for us to have another deferral. But this is something that has been on on the agenda for many decades, Dr. Khan. What should we be doing in reference of the property tax? And I want you to link that with the budget presentation as well. What should we be doing with the property tax at this time?
I would suggest to the Minister of Finance not to go with the property tax, because at the end of the day, it is going to be it's not going to be equitable. A lot of squatters and people who live in squatting areas, right, they will not be paying any property tax, and the middle class people who have paid for their houses are the ones that will be paying property tax. What the Minister of Finance should do is say, okay, I will stop the property tax, but I will increase the value-added tax on items that are not essential. Normal, basic food basket of essential items, I will leave that at 0 VAT, but I will increase luxury goods, etc., to 20 to 25% VAT. Online taxes will go to 50%, and anybody who is bringing stuff inside by certain items will attract 100% online tax.
You're listening to and viewing the Citizens Community Forum. Our topic this evening, expectations and recommendations for Budget 2021-2022, a citizen's perspective. And I have with me Dr. Fuad Khan, former Member of Parliament. Dr. Khan, we have just a few minutes again before we close the program, and I want to give you the opportunity in the closing moments to give us some closing remarks. Of course, as I said, we all know that we have Budget Day on the 4th of October. There's lots of expectations. Some people are saying, well, maybe we should be looking at ways that we can not just cut, but also add value in other areas, so that it's a very delicate balance. As you know, in every budget, every government, every Minister of Finance, has to come up with some kind of formula, some kind of mechanism, so that you can look at the greater good. Of course, there's also the saying that you would not be able to please everybody, whatever budgetary allocations are given to whatever ministries or whatever areas, certainly. But just give us your closing remarks on, as we look towards the 4th of October, Budget Day 2021 to 2022.
Stephen, thanks. I would like to recommend that you could marry health and finance and produce some bring in offshore medical schools. And when you bring in offshore medical schools to Tobago, you will get a cadre of students at all levels. So you will have medical education tourism, which will be ongoing, not just a normal 3-day tourist. And in doing so, you could start a national health insurance system, because that's been on the book for a while, marrying the public and private sector. You could at least get income and taxes from that. You could also start the national health card for people to have the health card system and records in place, so it could be transportable. You could start back the oncology center to bring in foreign exchange. And these were the things we are doing in health. You could start digitalizing the whole system and allow consultations abroad, having what they call merchants account in Trinidad and Tobago, because fintech is a very big thing now, and we are lapsing in fintech and financial tech advice. And there's a lot of things the finance minister can do. But I've always said budget is prepared by old people. We need young people to prepare budget, because it's a new world. These old people who prepare the budget is the same old documents come back at you year by year with the same garbage in, garbage out, and at the end of the day, nothing occurs. get the young people on board because they understand the digital world. The old people who prepare your budget do not.
All right. Dr. Khan, we'll have to leave it there at the moment. I want to thank you once again for being our guest on the Citizens Community Forum. It has been a pleasure, and we look forward to October 4th. I would want to also take the opportunity to speak with you again, probably post-budget, 2021,
Well, that'll be nice.
so that we can get a perspective of what I can get your perspective of what was said, both from the side of the opposition and side of the government. Thank you so much again, Dr. Khan.
And see, one question before you run away. I'm not opposition. I'm not government. I'm independent now. Thank God.
And that's the perspective that we'd want to have during the Citizens Community Forum. Our topic, expectations and recommendations for Budget 2021-2022, a citizen's perspective. And I had with me there Dr. Fuad Khan, former Member of Parliament, discussing the issues this evening. Well, as I said, we all look forward to October 4th, when the Finance Minister will present the fiscal package for Trinidad and Tobago. Lots of expectations. And wish lists, as it were, and we will continue to monitor all that's happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And on our next program, Wednesday, we will continue on this very same topic. Supposedly to be part 2 of expectations and recommendations for Budget 2021-2022. And we continue to focus on all that's happening with, or going to be happening with Budget 2021-2022. We all know that the fiscal package for Trinidad and Tobago will be presented on the 4th of October. And I do have with me online, joining us via Zoom, is Ms. Lara Quintal-Thomas. And we're going to just take the opportunity to chat with her for a brief moment. And let me just welcome Ms. Quintal-Thomas. Ms. Quintal-Thomas, good evening to you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much for inviting me. Good evening to all.
Yes, and we're happy to have you. Well, Ms. Quintal-Thomas, we have heard of the date for the budget 2021-2022, and I know that you would have some perspectives. We would usually ask all of our guests, about their wish list, and maybe we can start there. What would you like to see come October 4th as the Finance Minister presents the fiscal package for Trinidad and Tobago going into the next financial year?
So the list is long, and I know that you would have already spoken to a number of the different business chambers, and I would echo many of the sentiments already put forward by the AmCham, the TT Chamber, the TTCSI, including some of the refunds of that the government owes, that the government needs to settle its debt to private businesses, particularly small and medium-sized companies, so that we can get them back to business. But one of the things that struck me, and this has really been a global phenomenon, that women have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's homeschooling, whether it's loss of jobs, because women are, the majority of workers in the travel, tourism, retail sector, and of course those sectors were the hardest hit. So for me, if I had to sort of pick one thing out of the myriad of things that we would love to see, I really would like to get from the minister, from the government, an awareness of and a plan for helping our mothers and our women in the country to get back on their feet, whether it's subsidized childcare, whether it's incentives for women-owned businesses, because I think that, globally, the studies have shown that women have really suffered the most. I mean, obviously children have had their own challenges, but the situation that many mothers have found themselves in has really been terrible, and for such a sustained period of time. So I'd like to see some gender-based budgeting. I think that would be remarkable, and I know that's something that many governments are asked to think about going forward. Definitely the idea of the ease of doing business, something that we've talked a lot about. We have to get serious about digital government services, online payments, filling in. I mean, I recently tried to apply for a TD1 online. I said, okay, I'm going to use the e-tax. And it took me back and forth, getting this letter from the BIR and this thing, and then back, and you have to get an email. It took so long to do. And yet, of course, they'll probably proclaim that we're online and it's easy, and it was not. It was pretty horrendous.
Okay.
Don't even get me started on opening a bank account. So there are so many opportunities, I think, for our government to look at what's been done in other countries, learn those lessons, and really make Trinidad in the next 12, 18 months a great place to do business, whether you're a small business or a foreign investor, to open an account, to file your tax returns, whatever it might be. That, of course, is connected to access to foreign exchange, which is also a big challenge for us. So, and then the sort of third thing on my list would be, please, the full proclamation of the procurement legislation.
Okay.
I know that the individual regulations consultation has just come to an end. And so that's just been so long in coming. I mean, that law began 2015, it began its life, and we're now 2021.
Yes.
Those would be my top three: gender-based budgeting, ease of doing business, procurement.
All right. Ms. Quintal Thomas, I can't, let you go without, asking you to respond to the small and micro enterprise sector. Now, I know that you are a former president, is it, of the Trinidad and Tobago, coalition of service industries, and you would have a first-hand knowledge of some of the issues and some of the problems, the bottlenecks, and again, we can reference the ease of doing business. What would you like to see for the SMEs, going forward? Our budget, which, as I said, we all know will be read on the 4th of October. I've been hearing the calls and the cries from many sectors that we need a stimulus package. We need more to be done to advance the business of SMEs in Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, the region.
Yes, and I think, again, the studies have shown globally that SMEs are the lifeblood of every country, any country, the micro, small, medium-sized entrepreneurs, startups, those are really so critical. And of course, it's sad because many of them have suffered terribly during COVID, having to close, having to lay off staff, and so on. So I definitely would love to see some incentives for startups, for small business, especially getting young people into entrepreneurship, whether it's through grants. But again, you see, there's a lot of, we have some of these things in place. Our challenge is always access, firstly, and then accountability, secondly. So even with the grants that were given during COVID, the salary relief grants, some of the other grants that were given was so difficult to access. And we know that many people, applied and never heard anything back. So I believe that there is good intention in many of these budgets, but the execution is where we often, fall short. So yes, I would love to see incentives for startups, small business, particularly in innovative areas such as ICT, digital transformation, animation, moving our industries and our businesses forward away from the sort of traditional retail and I mean, even, tourism opportunities. So there's a lot of, I think, there's some great ideas about what can be done to support small businesses, but, giving the incentives to create future-looking businesses. So whether it's just you in your house on your computer, or you've got a shop with a few people in it, whatever it looks like, to really be focused on building future-proof companies. And I would just add, I really would like to see what the government is proposing to do with regards to the National Recovery Plan that was developed last year, as you know, in consultation with all aspects of the private sector. Where's that? That's what's happening with that.
No, I know that's a topic for another discussion, because I myself have been trying to get my hands on what has happened, to that plan, the roadmap to recovery. And I know that even the organization for which you once belonged has been calling for clarity and wanting to know exactly where are we where that is concerned. But as I said, that's a topic for another discussion, which certainly we can have at another time. But what I wanted to do as well, I know we just have a few minutes again. The hotel, restaurant, and travel, sectors have again been hardly hit, and I know that is also, you've been also monitoring what's been happening there. And we had a discussion earlier on with Hassel Tom, who I know that you're familiar with. He's associated with the Hotel and Restaurant Business Association, and this is what he said. We're just going to get a listen to what he told us during an earlier interview, and I will have you respond thereafter.
Okay.
What tourism product is. We look at where we are with the pandemic and how do we move forward and how soon are we going to encourage airlines to come back in Trinidad. So from other elements of the economy have reopened, and the hotel industry never actually closed, but then all the support system for the industry is still not there. So I am hoping that before we can look at 2020, 21, 2022, that we really need a very quick reset on 2021, so we can have an industry that with some enabling elements for the industry to operate at any material level of occupancy. For instance, we have the borders are open, but we have really one commercial airline flying in, and that's Caribbean Airlines. And I can tell you for the hotels, we have thousands of rooms and very few opportunities to fill them. And that is one, allowing the industry to have the ingredients that it must use to be able to generate revenue.
Again, Ms. Quinchel Thomas, another call there for support for another of our sectors within Trinidad and Tobago. He talked about a reset of the economy in the wider sense, but I'm sure you would want to respond to that as well.
Yes, and I totally agree with Hassel, and of course he knows the sector much better than I do, but I think one of the opportunities for Trinidad now, I think more as specific from Tobago, is for us to use our talent and our all of our different expertise to position us as a different type of tourism product. You know, we cannot compete as a sun, sea and sand destination. Tobago can, and that's fine. I think Trinidad, and I agree with Hassel about the difficulty with the hotel closures, the beaches being closed, all of these things could be considered deterrents. But let's look at other opportunities. For example, whether it's cultural tourism, heritage tourism, whether it's environmental, some of the conference tourism that we had enjoyed in the past. I really don't think Trinidad has a clearly defined tourism product. And I think that has held us back. We're trying to be all things to all men, and we can't be. We can't compete as a sun, sea and sand destination. We are really a very different product to many of the other Caribbean islands. So I really would love to see coming out of this an opportunity, as he said, to reset. I think that's great. Re-examine, what are we selling? Who are we selling it to? Do they want to buy it? How do we repackage? I know the whole Nicki Minaj debacle has, put Trinidad on the world stage in a very negative way in some cases. But
some people will tell you for all the wrong reasons. But
well, exactly, that's right. But could we leverage this moment in time, which yes, it's rather unfortunate, but could we leverage it to show people, who we are and what we have to offer, food and festivals and these sorts of things. So I really would love to see our tourism leaders come out with some innovative ways for us to promote Trinidad and Tobago and as a completely different type of destination. We cannot win in the sun, sea and sand sector. It's just not who we are. And I think that's something that we need to really reset and revisit.
Ms. Quinchel Thomas, was that the intent or the objective some years ago when there was a split between, when we look at the tourism product, we now had a Trinidad component and as opposed to a Tobago component. Was that the visioning at that time, you think, that attempts were made to do that? And maybe we may not have been successful as we thought we would have been.
I think you're right, but the problem we have is we don't put the infrastructure in place. So just a very simple example: if you wanted to promote Trinidad as a heritage destination, and you brought people, let's say, from the from the country of India to come and visit our amazing Hanuman statue temple in the sea, and all of these, you can create amazing experiences around Diwali or Eid or what have you. And yet, if you ever take tourists to these places, there's no public facilities, the restaurants are dire, there's no good signage. We've had tour buses of people, come from a hotel in town to go to Central to look at these different beautiful sites. And if somebody needs the bathroom, you're completely scuppered. Where do you take your tourists to go to the bathroom? You know, it's those little things that really take away from us delivering a first world
quality product.
Tourism product for tourists from Europe or Canada or India, wherever it is. So I think the infrastructure needs to be put in place. The raw material is there, the people are there, the talent is there, but it needs to be harnessed more effectively. And some of that is government, some of it is the tourism leaders. And I think there's opportunity for investment to build a really robust tourism product.
All right. Ms. Quinchell-Thomas, I am, conscious of your time. And
yes, thank you.
Close off maybe in the next 2 minutes or so, if you can allow us. But I don't want you to leave without giving us some closing remarks, as well as maybe just a brief response to the global pandemic, how that, has not just impacted on Trinidad and Tobago, but do you see us having to make a major shift in our budgetary allocations for 2021, 2022, and as I said, your closing remarks as well.
Thank you, Stephen. So I would say yes. I think this pandemic has shaken every country everywhere. We're certainly not alone, but it's also, I believe, provided us with really interesting, exciting opportunities to push Trinidad and Tobago into the 21st century and beyond. So let's use this. Yes, maybe borrowing. Yes, maybe looking at the way we do business, whether it's the private sector or the public sector. Those partnership opportunities that we talked about in the last budget that haven't materialized, now we can propel them forward. So really, I would like, for me, I've lived in Trinidad for 25 years, and I would like to see that the things that we plan become reality. That's where I often find we have a massive disconnect, and year after year budgets promise one thing and we wait to see, you might get a few delivered, but so let's actually hold them accountable for delivering, because the time of suffering and penance through the pandemic has ended. I totally think that we should be moving to mandate vaccines, but that's a whole nother conversation. I appreciate.
Yeah, very controversial.
But let's hold them accountable. We've suffered for 2 years nearly. So now the government needs to lead by example, and by really doing and putting things in place to bring Trinidad back, not to where it was, to a new reality, a new future for our country.
All right.
So I hope to be part of that solution.
Okay, Ms. Quinchell-Thomas, thank you so much again for chatting with us on the Citizens Community Forum, and for taking the time. I hope I didn't encroach too much. I know you have an engagement at the moment, but thank you,
Stephen.
Thank you again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Lara Quinchell-Thomas there, and talking with us on the Citizens Community Forum for this evening, and our focus is on the budget 2021-2022, and our topic this evening, expectations and recommendations for budget 2021-2022, a citizen's perspective. So until we see you, I guess we'll have another edition of the program, part 2, next Wednesday. See you then. It was a famous poet who once said, "They came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Words there from famous poet Martin Niemöller, 1892 to 1984.